hosted by Stafford County Board of Supervisors member Tinesha Allen. I am Bill Johnson Miles, your moderator for today. Griffis-Widewater is one of 7 districts in Stafford County, Virginia. It is the most northeastern district in the county, including the entire Widewater Peninsula, Boswell's Corner, half of Aquia Harbor, a portion of Marine Corps Base Quantico, and the neighborhoods adjacent to and north of the Stafford Marketplace and Dockstone Commons. More than 20,000 people live in the district. It is a common myth that important elections only take place every 2 or 4 years. But here in Virginia, there is an election every year. And the most important of those elections is your local elections. This is when your vote can actually make even more of a difference. Participating in local elections and in events like this town hall are more important than national politics because they decide so many things that will affect us in our daily lives. From local roads to school quality, from emergency services and public safety to how much you pay in property taxes, the list can go on, even down to how clean the water is when you brush your teeth every day. So your participation is very important. Democracy is at its best when the people's voices are heard. We are breaking down this town hall into 3 sections. In the first section, you will hear from Dr. Elizabeth Warner, Stafford County School Board member representing the Griffis-Widewater District. In the second section, Supervisor Tinesha Allen will speak. Our final section will be the Q&A segment, where we will try to get to as many questions as possible from our audience, both in person and on Zoom. We have designated a spot for those here in person to come up and ask your questions. Where is that spot? Where are they going to be able to do that? I'm sorry. Right in the center? Right in the center right here, okay. So if you want to ask questions in the audience, there'll be a spot right in the center where you can come up and ask your questions. Those who are on Zoom, add your questions to the Q&A tab. Once you've added your questions, be sure to review the other questions that have been posted and upvote or like the other questions that you would like to hear answered. Questions receiving the most votes will be prioritized. For the questions we are not able to get to today, we will take those questions, answer them, and email them to all and post them online. Again, I want to welcome all of you. Now let's get started. We will begin with school board member Dr. Elizabeth Warner. Liza was elected to the school board in November 2019 and began her term on January 1st, 2020. Dr. Warner earned her bachelor's degree in biology with a minor in chemistry from Wingate University in North Carolina. She then completed her master's work in microbiology, then switched programs to earn a PhD focused on cellular and molecular biology from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, UNCC. Her research work was centered on the pathology and treatment of liver disease. With their 3 children grown, Dr. Warner and her husband settled in Stafford in 2016. Liza has taught high school biology and chemistry. At UNCC, she also taught freshman block classes in biology and advanced classes in microbiology. She has mentored students from high school to those enrolled in medical school in a summer intern program offered by Atrium Healthcare. The program afforded students from many backgrounds the opportunity for hands-on project-based learning in a research laboratory. As a member of the school board, Dr. Warner is on the Finance and Budget Committee and the Governance Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Elizabeth Warner.
First of all, I want to thank everyone. I appreciate your taking time out of your Saturday, and I think this is an important opportunity for both Ms. Allen and myself to answer your questions. I think that a lot of our constituents have questions about how we reach decisions and why we make some of the choices that we do. When I came to the school board, one of the things that was important to me was trying to build consensus and work with the other members because much of the board was very dysfunctional. It's not easy. So we all have different points of view. But my background worked with children from 5 to resident physicians. I think that education is the great equalizer. I think it's how we build a strong community and a strong society. For our teacher pay, because we know that the number one thing for all of our students is the opportunity to have a good teacher. And the building is somewhat less important, but the teacher is critical, because a good teacher makes all the difference in a child's life. I also think that we need to address the growth issue in Stafford County. We're the second largest growth community in Virginia. Prince William builds a new school and opens a new school every year. They've done so for a decade. The last school that we opened was Moncure. We are in desperate need of more capacity. And overcrowded schools are a difficult place for children to learn. COVID certainly threw us all for a kind of a loop. That was my first. Came on board in January. In March, we were in the midst of COVID and the schools had shut down. Because it was a novel virus and we didn't know much about the impact it was going to have on students, we were very cautious. For the last year and a half, I have been asking the Rappahannock Area Health Department to give us parameters because I knew that the all or nothing masking scheme that we were using, especially on our young children, was not a very effective strategy. It impacted their learning, the hybrid learning, the closed school, and we have been struggling to rebuild since then. I will look forward to answering any of your questions. Specifically, I don't know if there's anything else that I can add, and I will pass this to Tinesha.
All right, thank you, Dr. Warner. And now we will move on to the host of this town hall, Supervisor Tinesha Allen. Tinesha and her family have lived in Stafford County since 2015. Her husband is an elementary math and science teacher, and her daughter is in elementary school. The supervisor is a graduate of Vanderbilt University with a degree in political science. She serves as a Vanderbilt University Corps interviewer for students in Stafford and surrounding counties. She also recently earned a nursing degree from Shenandoah University. Tinesha was elected to the Board of Supervisors in November 2019 with a winning margin of just 13 votes. As a member of the Board of Supervisors, she's the chair of the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee, a member of the Infrastructure Committee, and the Stormwater Infrastructure Funding and Implementation Ad Hoc Committee. She acts as the board's appointee to the Potomac and Rappahannock Transportation Commission and the Potomac Watershed Roundtable, and the Northern Virginia Military Resilience Commission. Alan is also one of 2 board members acting as primary liaisons in the county's Emergency Operations Center during emergencies. Ladies and gentlemen, Supervisor Tinesha Allen.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the town hall. Thanks to Dr. Warner for accompanying me in this town hall, and to Mr. Johnson Miles and everyone at LCPM for putting this town hall on. And one of the things people have asked me since I've been elected is, when do you get to do a town hall? And as Dr. Warner kind of hinted, unfortunately, as soon as we got on our respective boards, COVID kind of smacked us dab in the face 2 months within our terms. And to make matters worse, I actually contracted COVID around the same time that it became widespread in the community. And so for the last 2 years, it's been a little difficult to have to navigate county business and being involved with town halls. But the minute that everything was opening back up, I had the opportunity to do a town hall, and I wanted to take advantage of it because through these discussions, not only do the residents get to understand my point of view, but I get to hear from them what is it that I'm not doing and what is it that they would like me to do. And going forward, Dr. Warren and I hope to make this a biannual thing where at the beginning of the year we do one, especially during budget season, to give people a snapshot of what's happening, and then at the end of the year to do a summation and trying to get feedback of what you would like to see going into the following calendar year. So with that behind me, I will start on what's been my basis since I've been on the board, what's been my principle. So when I got on the board, one of the things that I'm going to frame this entire conversation around is infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, I don't only mean transportation, but I mean education, public safety, obviously roads, and broadband. That has been the county's singular greatest need and has been the singular greatest adversity that I've faced since I've been on the board, more so than what I could have anticipated. And I say that because Stafford County is at a precipice where the county in the past census is roughly approximately almost 160,000 residents. So Stafford County is not the rural Stafford County that it was, but it's also not completely Northern Virginia in terms of a Fairfax or Prince William. We still do have our rural character charm. And so with that said, the county has growing needs because not only does it offer great amenities in terms of our environmental location, our proximity to DC, our tax rate, our public safety, and our schools, it's very attractive to people up north to move down as they're undergoing their great migration. And so as we, I'm trying to think of the best word to put it, as we entertain more people in the county, the needs that we once had are now becoming larger. Our cracks are now being bust open, for lack of a better word, to try to get you guys to understand what we really face. And so I'll start with roads. Unlike our neighbors to the north, Stafford County is pretty much bisected by 2 major roads, whether it's Route 1, which is now called Richmond Highway, or the Interstate 95. You can go north and south basically through those roads. Our back roads, you know, they're meant to help, but not with the level of services that they've been undergoing. And so now we have all these needs to take care of our roads, not just our primary roads, but also these secondary back roads. And so now we have to figure out how to get people not only north to south, but east to west, because we don't have many major arteries going through the county besides 17 and 610. And so as the county is growing, in my mind, how do I help with infrastructure? How do we get the roads up to par? Well, one of the ways that Stafford County takes care of its roads is through your personal property tax, which is the tax that you receive for your vehicles, your boat. Well, boats, we don't really have a tax on that. It's set at 0. But your vehicles, your motorcycles, if you're a commercial business, your properties, your equipment, all that. So that money is used along with some funding from our general fund to address our capital projects. And one of the things that we also have to do is we rely on the state to help fund some of these projects through different mechanism, whether it's Smart Scale, NVTA, and a bunch of other acronyms that I'll sit here and I'll be here forever telling it to you. But the genesis of saying that is that what we try to do is we try to go through a process called matching the funds, where, as you know, in the state of Virginia, we don't control our roads, the state controls our roads. And so whenever we have a project, for example, in Widewater, with Decatur Road, when we have a project that's on the books from VDOT, what we try to do on the county side is we try to have matching funds so that maybe, for example, when Decatur was getting resurfaced, we said, well, why not widen it at the same time instead of the county having to undertake that expense on its own? That way we mitigate costs. The problem is that the frequency with which VDOT does a lot of projects in the county isn't at the pace it needs to be able to consistently address our needs. Most of VDOT funding pretty much goes to the Northern Virginia counties and to Hampton roads. And so for us, we have a smaller pool of monies that we have to compete with the other counties in the entire state to get stuff done. And so that presents a challenge: is how do we fix the road infrastructure knowing that we only have a limited pool to address that? And one of the ideas that has been floating around, and unfortunately, you know, it's one that I believe deserves more vetting, and I intend to do that, is how do we increase the funding through a transportation authority? I know people necessarily don't like taxes, and I agree. I don't like more taxes, but if you have a singular need, and every Stafford resident can tell you, whether you live in the north, south, east, or west, the roads are a problem. Whether it's the major roads, the secondary roads, or the back roads, they are a problem. And so how do we address it so that we're not relying on the state to provide funds to us that are not sufficient enough to meet our needs? We're one of the wealthiest counties in the state. And so at some point, we have to figure out how to take certain measures into our own hands, because roads are not just about convenience, they're also about safety. Most of our roads are either too narrow or they can't handle the school buses. You know, in Widewater, there are a lot of roads that are very narrow that our school bus drivers have to navigate. And they have to do so at nights when it's not, or I should say in the dark, when it's not favorable to such conditions. And they've done an amazing job, but we shouldn't be putting people's lives and our kids' lives at risk because we don't want to take care of our roads. So how do we help fix that? Well, I intend to, in the remaining years of my term, try to figure out how to develop a transportation authority so that we can figure out how to generate more funds to make us competitive for more state money. Because one of the things that I learned is that the more money as a county that you have to put up to the state, the more likely they're willing to give you a larger pools of money. If you don't have as much money to match, the state is not going to give you larger sums of money to do certain projects. So that's one part of infrastructure. The other part is public safety. And public safety is not just the manpower. We are severely lacking manpower for our sheriff deputies and for our firefighters, but it's also building. With the amount of residents we have a great deal of need for firehouses and fire stations and EMT services and fire and deputies, as I said, so that they're not constantly stressed. And right now, the way the county is growing, we are not keeping up sufficiently, in my opinion, to meet those needs. And I will say that is a great testament to the leadership in the county, that Sheriff Decatur and Chief Cardella and his team has done an amazing job being able to keep our residents safe, knowing that they're in need of greater resources. So how do we fix that? Well, one of the things that I want to do is to be able to make sure that we start funding firehouses. I know a lot of people will say, well, you know, it's the new developments that are causing this. Well, yeah, we can say that, but even if you say that, it still doesn't change the fact that you still need a firehouse, you still need more sheriff deputies, and you still need more firefighters and EMT. So that challenge is in front of us. And so regardless of what development is in the pipe works or will be in the pipe works, we still have a great need in front of us. And so one of the things that I plan to vote for during this tax season is potentially a fire tax, which will be geared towards funding, for example, fire stations, which are extremely expensive, as well as potentially raising the tax rate so that the sheriff deputies and the fire chiefs can hire more people and put in more academies so that our residents are safe. Because if you don't have enough firefighters and you don't have enough deputies, you are putting people's public safety at risk. And we know in Stafford County, public safety is one of the greatest things that we have to offer. We have amazing group of people who do amazing work. And so so I feel it's our duty to start to support that. And one of the things that, like I said, I plan to do is support them through generating more funds to give their department so that they have more work that they can do. The other one is for infrastructure, because I'm trying to say a lot of this fast so that I have time for questioning, is broadband. Stafford County has a very serious issue for certain neighborhoods, especially Widewater, when it comes to broadband. A lot of people, especially in this area, rely on internet, and it was never more obvious than during the pandemic when you saw what people undertook. I heard stories of parents having to go to the library or going to coffee shops to be able to either do their work or have their kids Zoom in to have schools. And in a county that's this wealthy, we cannot afford to do that. In a county that's 40 miles outside of our nation's capital, we cannot have broadband be a singular issue that is major for us. And so one of the things that I plan to do is, well, the board has done already, is we have pushed for a master plan study of all of our broadband infrastructure. That was one of the first things when I got on the board. I talked to our staff. I said, how do we get an idea of what broadband in Stafford County looks like? Because I don't want us to invest money to plug gaps and not realizing we don't know the full extent. And so with that said, last year, the board did approve a contract to allow us to undergo an extensive master plan to study all the broadband infrastructure of Stafford County. It is a similar thing that we're doing with transportation as well. We've just put out an RFP, I believe, and we're in the design phase of doing a complete master plan study of our transportation needs in the county so that we know what our greatest needs are. Instead of us just plugging, we can maybe start having a more direct, sensible plan in addressing the infrastructure needs in the county. And so for broadband, once we have the master plan back, then we as a board can start figuring out, okay, now that we know that this and this is our underserved areas and this needs to get fixed, how do we start doing that? What are some of the revenue sources that we can gear towards that? What are some federal grants or state grants that we can go to? We can't apply for as much monies as we want to if we don't know what the problem is. Now, we know there are problematic areas in Widewater, in Rock Hill, in Hartwood, and in George Washington, and parts of Aquia. We know that. But we don't truly know what the network looks like until we have that master plan. And once we do, and it's the same thing for transportation, once we truly do know what our roads look like, then that makes us even more positioned to compete for funds in a more organized and systematic way so that we can start addressing our needs. And the board is not sitting there being reactionary. My approach is to have the board be proactive in that way that we're not causing our citizens great strife because we're making their lives more inconvenient. My job as an elected official is to make your job less stressful as possible. And what that means is I try to make your quality of life better. And in order to do that, we have to fix the infrastructure in the county so that you're not sitting there worrying when you're going to the grocery store, well, you know, is the road safe? Or is there so much traffic? How can I navigate this? Or if you're home and you're working, is my internet gonna go out? Is my power gonna go out? Or, you know, if you live, for example, there was a fire here a couple of weeks ago. Am I going to have enough time for the fire department to respond to me? Or if I need the deputies' assistance, am I going to have enough time for them to respond? That should not be a concern. It should be when you come home, you should say, I have complete confidence. And we do, but I want you to have more confidence that at the end of the day, when you come home, that Stafford County will take care of you and your family. And so that's how I am positioning my train of thought and how I plan to tackle issues is how do we fix the infrastructure in Stafford County? And I'm hoping that when I get to leave, whenever that is, I don't know, but I'm hoping that I can say that I've made some type of dent in getting us into that direction, because at the end of the day, it is government, things do take time, but if we can be on the right track, the whole process, the whole idea and process is to have future generations and future leaders to build on that progress, and instead of us having to create new avenues for them to figure out how to fix stuff. I want to have the master plans in there so that we're just plugging and fixing as opposed to trying to do massive overhauls constantly, because if you keep doing that, it becomes extremely expensive over time. And so with that said, I'm going to pause for now and answer any questions, because I could be here forever probably rambling.
I could just piggyback on that a little bit. Our community is high residential density. Doesn't have a lot of businesses, but it's got a lot of people. And the infrastructure part of this is what's critical. The roads impact how we transport our students, and we all know we had a transportation problem last year. And part of it is because the efficiency of moving, especially students at middle school and high school, is impacted by the fact that we have large schools that are spaced pretty far apart. And most of those schools only have one way in and one way out. One of the things I would like to see the county do is maybe have an impact study, just a statement, an impact statement from public safety, from the schools, from transportation, so that when we get new subdivisions, the county is at least aware and says, okay, this is going to bring 700 families in. This is how many kids we expect in our schools. This is what we need for this, what should be the public safety ratio. This should be the firehouse, so that we're at least planning ahead to meet those infrastructure needs. And I appreciate that Ms. Allen has been really responsive when I've asked her questions. But I will let the audience.
All right, thank you guys for your opening statements and your words there. We're going to go to questions now, do the question and answer session. So what I'm thinking about doing, Princess, what I'm thinking about doing is actually getting up and, oh, you got the microphone for the people? Okay. So if you want to ask a question, raise your hand. Princess, you'll come to them? Okay. So raise your hand if you want to ask a question, and Princess will come to you with the microphone. All right. Please let us know who you are and if you're representing anybody in particular, and then ask your question.
Yeah, actually, I have many questions that came to mind, but I'll start with one, and hopefully others will think of questions regarding the infrastructure that Ms. Allen mentioned. Oh, and my name is Elaine Callender. I actually come from Falmouth District, but I tend to follow countywide issues. Regarding infrastructure, I know that during the redistricting process for the magisterial districts for supervisor and school board election districts, there was a problem because the county is lacking in community centers, schools, and firehouses, public buildings, where precincts should be located. And in fact, as I pulled into this location, I wondered if this room was large enough to be a precinct, because in Griffis-Widewater, you've got a precinct now at the Aquia Episcopal Church, which is going to be very difficult, I think, for people to get in and out of on a busy election day, and that was brought up to the redistricting committee. I guess maybe I'm making a statement instead of a question. Let me think how I can word this as a question. I do want to go ahead and make this point, though. We're supposed to be using public buildings, not churches, and now we have Aquia Episcopal Church being used as a precinct, and Mount Ararat Church as a precinct. Can you, I guess I'm supporting what you said, that we need more community buildings, and maybe I should just leave it at that.
Yeah, great point. So that is very true. So I actually did want to correct something that Mr. Johnson Miles said. Aquia Harbor is no longer in the Griffis-Widewater precinct. During the redistricting process, the entire Aquia subdivision became one, and it's now part of the Aquia district, with Supervisor Gary and School Board Member Maya Guy being your representative now. Dr. Warren and I are no longer your rep. Now, that doesn't mean you can't reach out to us, but we just wanted to let you guys know, because that just recently happened. And now all of Route 1 up to 610 is now, except for Aquia Harbor, all of Potomac, the hills of Aquia and Potomac Hills and Port Aquia are now all part of the Griffis-Widewater District. So I do want to point that out. You are absolutely correct. So we do have an infrastructure problem when it comes to our buildings for voting. And one of those challenges was never more evident than during redistricting, and especially for Griffis-Widewater. And I'll say this. When we looked at our maps and when we did redistricting, for those of you who were able to join us, and I know, Ms. Callender, that you were at some of our sessions, what we did as a board, we looked at census block. And one of the things that I noticed personally, looking at the blocks when our staff were doing the maps, was that Stafford County's buildings are pretty much all centered in a very minute location. They're either all along Route 195 or along 17, 610, and Courthouse Road. And most of our population is also centered around these major arteries, and it was designed that way from the comprehensive plan throughout the county's history. But as our county grows east and west and north and south, now you have these communities who now need to exercise their right to vote. Having to find locations for them to vote became very, very problematic. And I'll bring this to the Griffis-Widewater. So with the new subdivision across the street called Freedom Point, and the one in Telegraph called, oh God, I can't remember the name because they haven't put their signs up yet. But with those new communities, we added almost 200 new homes. And we needed to have a new precinct because the census block told us to. And we decided to use Shirley Heim as one of the new voting locations, and we were going to call it Midway. And we did look at the Carl Lewis Center, but because the people that are voting in Heim were going to Heim, we had to figure out how to keep the people on Griffiths voting in a proximity that was closest to them. And so I think I'm the only district who has two parts where 95 splits the district between Griffiths is on 95 and Widewater is on Route 1. And so Griffiths now had a new precinct where we had to figure out where to put voters. And if you are familiar with 610 from the beginning of the interstate, and I believe the district ends up to about Cause Automotive, there aren't many public buildings that we have that you can vote besides Moncure and Walter Barrett. There just isn't. And Moncure and Walter Barrett were already being used as voting sites for existing Griffiths precinct, but because we had to have more precincts, we had to figure out, well, what would be the least restrictive way and the least confusing way to get voters that live in Port Aquia and the hills of Aquia and parts of Stafford Market Place to vote without getting them too far down in Widewater. And unfortunately, we had to use one of the options that's given to us by the state, which is you can use nonprofits and churches. And the Aquia Episcopal was really the only option we had to get voters close enough to their neighborhoods without putting them further out. We could have, but it made more sense to put them across the street from the church than to make them come down into Widewater if you live in Griffiths. And that's just a testament of we just don't have buildings. And how do you solve that? Honestly, I don't know. You can only solve that by building more, but unfortunately, we're not going to build it fast enough to give you the ability to go vote like tomorrow at a public facility. We're just not. And so in the meantime, we kind of have to get creative. Maybe at some precincts we have 2 voting sites, or we have to use churches. But it's really a testament to not only of our lack of infrastructure that we as a government own, but also the way our county is growing, where we have people living in communities now that traditionally didn't live in these areas, and then we have to make sure that we provide voting mechanisms for them so that they can cast their votes, because we're also required by law not to have people, I think, 3 miles outside of a voting precinct. So we can't even send people to all the schools because in some communities it will violate state law. And so, as Ms. Callender said, redistricting really showed us what buildings as a county we have and what buildings we don't. And unfortunately, going forward, the only way you fix that is to build more. And eventually, we're going to have that conversation. How do we build more? Because we're going to build more, not because of voting, but because of true necessity. Like Dr. Warner said, we need more schools. The capacity is there. We need more schools. The data is there. We need more schools. We need more fire stations. And we need more community centers, I would argue, as well, where the county and the residents can own these buildings and say, I'm going to where my tax dollars are funding so that I can cast my right to vote. And so going forward, that's something that as a board that we're going to have to address.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and ask a question from here, and then we'll go back to the audience. So since we've had both you guys here together, let's go to education. And the budget for the school district is coming up soon. So my question is this. One, it's a two-part question. How is what is the relationship between the school board members and the Board of Supervisor members? How's that relationship working? And two, talk a little bit about the budget. For instance, Spotsylvania is adding an additional $21 million to that's how much they add to the school budget. The Prince William County is adding $44 million. We're probably not even near that amount for Stafford. Can you talk about the budget and ongoing relationship between the board members?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Johnson-Miles. Tinesha and I have a great working relationship. As a matter of fact, she visited the school board offices, and we reviewed some of the decision-making process to the new high school. I've always tried to make sure that I'm available to answer any questions. And our budget this year, we have a request into the school board or to the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors funds a portion of our budget. About 65% of our budget comes from the state base, but that's only for like SOQs or the standards of quality. So anything above that or anything extra or anything else, we have to rely on the county budget. We have requested $11 million. I'm not sure where that number is going to fall. Last year it was around $5 million, and it makes it a little bit harder for us to get to fill all the needs that we have in schools. For example, our budget and our budget includes compensation and benefits. That accounts for 86% of the money we spend. That's a fixed rate because schools are labor intensive. They're labor intensive, they're infrastructure intensive. We have transportation, we have buildings, we have nutrition, we have all these different aspects that are beyond just the teaching part. So most of our money goes right into our compensation and benefits, and 70% of our employees live in Stafford County. So since I've been on the board, I have seen that percentage increase. So the first year I was on the board, it was about 84%, which left us 16% for discretionary spending. Now it's up to 86%. We only have 14% for discretionary spending. We have a 3R list, which is rehab, rehabilitate, rebuild, things that need to be fixed and repaired. That's multiple pages. We try to prioritize those things. So, for example, school roofs need to be fixed. We have to fix those first. Plumbing, HVACs, generators. This year we've seen a lot of work on our generators because we had power outage for a week in some places. I have had an excellent working relationship with Ms. Allen, plus the school board and the Board of Supervisors set up what's called the 3-on-3, which is a joint schools working group. And generally speaking, we bring specific issues to that committee and then try to come up with creative solutions. I think that there is a varying degree of success in that process because there's been a lot of mistrust over the years between the two boards, and many of us are trying to work to repair that.
Yeah, Dr. Warner is absolutely correct. Her and I, we have a great relationship, and you have to because technically the schools are our largest employer, and their largest portion they're one of the largest sources of where your tax dollars go to in the county. And so you have to have a functional relationship, and you have to have a great relationship because part of that process, as she alluded to, includes trust. And you, obviously, as a supervisor and even as a board and a school board member, you don't have the time to go through each other's day-to-day jobs or go through the different budgetary processes or you know, anything in general that will allow you the opportunity to do your own research into their matter. And so, yes, we do research, but not the deep dive that we would individually do in our own boards. And so, for example, if the school is asking for something, yeah, I do my research, but I'm not going to do as deep of a dive just because of the time constraint of my own job. And I have Dr. Warner because I trust her. If she tells me something, I'm going to take her as her word because in 2 years, she hasn't let me astray. But whatever she tells me also, she can provide information that leads me down to a path when I talk to our county staff and say, hey, this is what I heard. Can you verify it or can you produce information that I can use? And so by having that working, functional, trusting relationship with her, I can utilize her knowledge to then, when there's school board issues in front of the board that I have to vote on, I'm more informed and I feel confident in my vote because I have that relationship with Dr. Warner. Now, as it relates to funding the schools, I have always funded, since I've been on the board, I've always called, and our board has done that, but I've always called for us to fully fund whatever the superintendent is asking for because that is their job. They're telling us what it takes to get our schools operational and functional and competitive. And so if they're telling us they need X amount of dollars, I'm going to fund that. And if that's what it takes to make sure that we have that relationship in terms of trust, then I'm banking on the school board when they come before me to be truthful in what they're asking for. I'm not banking on them telling me things that are not truthful or that there may be hiding. Like, I don't sit there worrying about that. When they come before us and they're asking us for funding, I fund it because, like I said, that's their avenue. They know what's best for the students, and so the only thing I can do is support that. To your question about why are we not maybe funding more, I would argue I believe the school board should ask us for what they really want. I have even told the new superintendent that, Dr. Taylor, and I've told Liza that, Dr. Warner that, is I want you to really ask us and tell us the number that it is. Don't tell us what you think is going to get passed by the board. Because oftentimes, and that's part of the process too, is I feel the school board maybe only ask us what they think we're willing to fund. So we may not at times truly know if they need more. I'm of the mindset of when it comes to schools, because they're so critical, because at the end of the day, to be honest, schools play a larger role in determining your property value because people are going to move. There's great schools, okay? They just will. And so for me, if the schools are really telling me, for example, I'm not saying they are, but just as an example, that they need $50 million, truly, that's their real target, but they're only asking us for 30, I can't go ahead and tell the board we should be funding them at 50 if they didn't come and ask us for 50. So I think the onus needs to be on the schools going forward to truly ask us what their real number is and let the board then decide if we want to meet that number. And if we don't, then we need to answer to the voters why we don't want to meet that number. But we are only funding what we're being asked to fund. And so if you feel that the schools should be asking us for more money, I absolutely agree. They should ask us for more money so that the ball's in our court and we get to decide and say yes or no or maybe. But until they truly tell us their real number, we're never going to know the true cost is going to take to fund schools in Stafford County.
And since I've been on the board, that has been our directive to the superintendent, to Dr. Kisner, and now to Dr. Taylor, is that we need to ask for what we need. We aren't going to go in and ask for what we can get by with, or what we think they're going to give us, because the school does have real needs. The school has real needs that haven't been met, and I think also part of that trust issue is to be honest about what the school needs, but be able to explain why we need it, and what we're getting for that money, and what we're doing with it, and being able to show the results for that. Because I don't think it's enough to just say, well, we want $15 million or $50 million. It's like, what are you doing with it? And how is it going to benefit the students? And how is it going to improve education? And how is it going to be good for our community? Because we have to know those answers too.
All right, thank you. We have a school question from online, so I'm going to go to that first before we go back to the audience. This one is from Clayton Hill. He says, charter school expansion is on a large scale poses an existential threat to public education. As charter schools proliferate, they strip public schools of adequate funding. The long term is no mystery, moving a critical mass of children out of the public schools as a means of destabilizing and then destroying them. This is what the privatization movement is all about, which is not the well-being of students. We in Stafford have seen this play out in the CRT issues and removing a mask mandates advocated by some camps. It is going full force in Spotsylvania. What does the school board plan to do in response to the anticipated movement to push for charter schools? And Clayton would like to see both of you answer this.
I came from North Carolina, and charter schools were a big deal in North Carolina. But the one thing about charter schools is they don't have a lot of oversight. One thing I can say about the schools and the school board is there's tremendous transparency. Do you want to see our budget book? It's online. You can access every aspect of it online. You want to see our curriculum? You can access it online. You can access it and link it to the state standards. If parents have a particular problem with some curriculum, we have policies in place that they can opt their child out of that material, and we will find an alternative assignment. Public schools are subject to scrutiny from not only local county boards, but from the state and from the parents. Charter schools aren't subject to those same standards, and also they don't have to provide an education to all students. So if you have students with a high ESOL population, if you have students with learning disabilities, if you have students with special needs, charter schools do not have to provide them with an education. They do not have to accept them. So this idea that charter schools are going to replace public schools is erroneous. It also diverts resources away from the public schools, because there is no way, if you have underfunded public education system, that you're going to take charter schools and you're going to suddenly have more money and add them as an extra benefit. What you end up doing is you end up supplementing private education for people who could afford to send their kids to private schools. And you end up hurting the public education system because you're diverting valuable resources away from them.
I won't profess to know about this issue as much as Dr. Warner, but I can say that I am a product of public education. I went to public school, and I'm proud to say I went to public schools. As it relates to Stafford County and charter schools, that is something that the school board will have to decide when it comes, but as long as I'm on the board, I'm going to make the decision that's in the best interest of the county, and that involves me having the data. I will say, you know, I have friends who run their own charter networks from college, and they're some of the best performing charter schools in their respective states. My sister-in-law is part of a charter network, but I also know that schools have their own downfalls, as Dr. Warner mentioned. And so I don't know what the correct answer is, but I will say is you kind of have to ask yourself, why are we even having this conversation in the first place if it's in Stafford County? What is causing parents to even want to entertain the option of sending their kids to a charter school versus a public school? And I think once you find that source of discontent, then you fix that. And you let parents know that at the end of the day, it's your tax dollars that are governing public education. If you feel like there's an issue and the schools are not meeting that needs, there are avenues, as Dr. Warner mentioned, that you can go through to get your needs addressed one way or the other. Whereas charter school, it's a little bit more nebulous in terms of how they get their jobs done and how you have oversight. And so for us, I think as long as we're living in Stafford County, as elected officials, we just have to make sure that we're transparent and that we have an open door and that we're answering the needs of the community, so that we're not at that point where we have to answer that question of should we have a charter in Stafford County. Because if we're meeting the needs of our citizens and we're servicing our students to the best of their abilities and we're putting them in positions to be future leaders, and the return on investment is exceptional, then we won't even need to have that conversation. And I think right now at Stafford County, we're doing a good enough job. We just need to get better.
All right, thank you. So now let's go to questions again from the audience. We have a couple of hands raised. Whatever one you want to choose first. There we go. Please state your name and if you're with an organization, and then your question.
My name is Julie. I'm not from any organization. I do teach in the county, but I also live up in Griffis-Widewater. I live up on Decatur Road, which everybody's been asking really great general questions. I'm going to ask a really specific question. I live on Decatur Road. In the 15 years I've been there, the traffic has grown exponentially. Now, I know there's not a lot we can do about the developments that are in the back, or even the fact that they opened up what was supposed to be an emergency gate and is now used all the time by the people from the harbor. My issue really is more that we have huge trucks coming up and down that road all the time, and it is unsafe. Almost on a daily basis, I am almost run off the road, specifically the ones that go down the pick apart down on Norman Road. What, if anything, can be done to alleviate some of this problem? Because it is a really unsafe situation. That road is not wide enough to accommodate those kinds of vehicles.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for being a teacher in our county. Great question. You're not the only person. I mean, as you said, if you even go to the winery, Decatur Road and a lot of the roads in the peninsula are very windy and they're very narrow. Even with the widening, I mean, it made a difference, but it's not like it made a great difference. And so that kind of goes back to what I talked about in infrastructure, how our county roads are not meant to support certain businesses or certain neighborhoods. And so how do we try to fix that? Well, one of the things you try to do is, one, going forward, you don't put certain businesses in certain locations that necessarily can't handle that. So like, for example, you know, maybe not putting a parts yard up in Widewater is probably not the best solution, because as you said, you do have large trucks, and some of the times they're coming around the corner. You can't even see them, especially if it's dark. I can just imagine. And Widewater has a lot of cliffs. So I hear you, I really do. And that's a matter of me having to have a conversation with VDOT. And matter of fact, as you're hearing, and for anyone who has concerns about the roads up in Widewater or Griffiths, I have a meeting coming up in about a week or two with our regional resident director for VDOT for the Fredericksburg area. And this is one thing that I will bring up to VDOT, because at the end of the day, our roads are VDOT maintained. And so I will bring this up to Mr. Bates and say, hey, Kyle, I know we can't tell a business what you can and can't do because they have the right to do it, but how do we keep our roads safe? And I'm hoping with the master plan, when it comes back, that all these secondary roads and all these back roads, I'm hoping that our consultants give us some type of engineering solution, because going forward, we are going to have those challenges in the county. But if we don't figure out how to fix it, then we're going to have a true public safety issue. And what does that mean? I don't know. I don't have that answer. But what I will do is try to find that solution for you. And I started that process by having that conversation with VDOT and say, my residents are having serious safety concerns. What can you do to help mitigate that? Does it mean maybe more speed bumps, or, you know, maybe have flashing signs, or maybe clocking people, whatever it is, but we've got to do something to address those issues so that we're not at the point where we're having to react because unfortunately something happened that we could have prevented. And so my answer to you is, I'm going to talk to VDOT about it, and I'm going to try to figure out how to fix that, and I'll get back to you. Because I can't sit here and tell you what is the solution to that, because they did try to widen the road, but as you know, there's only so much space you can widen. And so hopefully I can get back to you, and then before you leave, I would ask that you leave your information so that I can follow up with you and let you know what our staff suggested, because we do have a great, amazing transportation staff, and what VDOT has suggested to help with some of these mitigation issues.
Let's go ahead and stay on that issue. Let's talk a little bit about growth, smart growth. Talk a little bit about, well, for instance, I've just recently read, I think I read, where Stafford is the second fastest growing county in the state. And it's a lot of people real fast. How are we handling the planning of those people, especially when it comes to schools, for instance, or infrastructure? Can both of you talk about the growth in the county and how we're handling that?
So I'll start a little bit first this time, Dr. Warner. So I ran on smart growth, and when I said smart growth, I didn't mean that I was going to be anti-growth. I haven't voted for a subdivision in our community in Widewater or Griffiths, but when I say smart growth, I'm thinking of, if we're going to approve developments, it has to be along the arteries in the county that are designed to handle that, so that if they're going into an area, it's not impacting the roads as negatively or our schools as possible. I try to have the least restrictive or the least negative impact approach in how I vote for subdivisions or even commercial, because at the end of the day, we can't not approve anything. The county has to grow its tax base, and we have to have, we want to be a welcoming county, but we also have to make sure that we're putting the new development in places that are meant to handle that. And so for me, it means making sure that when we get transportation impact analysis, that we're not degrading the roads in a way that we're going to have to end up paying tenfold for that. Or it means when developers are coming in front of us and telling us stuff, when people come and tell us, hey, listen, I would recommend that you not put something there because it's not safe. I know when I got on the board, there were 2 projects that I was potentially going to vote on. I won't say for legal issues, but I remember someone said to me, hey, just drive down there and go look at it for yourself, and then you determine. Because sometimes when we get asked to vote for stuff in other districts, we don't know what it looks like. I won't pretend to sit here and tell you I know what Hartwood looks like or all of Rock Hill. It's impossible. But I went and I saw for myself, hey, this is maybe not a great location, and I didn't support the project because I said this is not some place that is meant to handle almost 200 homes. And so for me, smart growth means you pick and choose developments in a way that it does grow the county, but it's also not hindering the county's already fragile infrastructure needs. And I know, people have said, well, what about the zoning? We did change our zoning laws. We went from 3-acre by right to 6. And a lot of this stuff also is, as a county, if people are developing by right, we don't get anything for it, regardless. Like, we can, as a county, tell them to give us funds to improve their roads. And that was something that I didn't approve. Like, I didn't vote for downzoning, not because I don't fundamentally believe that we need to control by right. I just didn't believe that that was the way to do it. I believe we needed to incentivize growth in a way where we wanted to reward people who were growing along the corridors that we wanted them to grow, so that we could invite more commercial space. And Widewater is a perfect example. We struggle to attract commercial real estate along the northern part of Route 1 from the Prince William County line to 610. We don't really have any marquee commercial business that we can hang our hats off. And one of those issues when I've had conversations with our economic development and when I've talked to businesses themselves, it's not that we don't want to come to Stafford. They pick the same spots because of density issues. For them, it's like, well, you guys don't have the density in Widewater that we need to attract foot traffic to our jobs. And for some of them, they're like, 610 has foot traffic, Mine Road has foot traffic, 17 has foot traffic. I can go on and on. So for me, it was like, okay, from an economic standpoint, I need to make sure if I'm supporting economic development, it has to have a residential component to it. But if I'm going to support residential, it has to be where the county can support it. So I've said when it comes to Griffis-Widewater, I'm only going to support subdivisions that are along our major corridors that can handle that need. And it's not just the roads, but the schools. The schools show us exactly what their capacities are. Thankfully for Widewater, Shirley Himes, and Widewater Elementary, we don't have a capacity issues for our elementary and middle. High school we will in Brook. But for the Griffith sides, North Stafford will eventually become an issue, but at least Moncure and Barrett for the next couple of years are not in terms of capacity. So in the back of my mind, I know that I have a few seats to spare. But I'm not just going to put a subdivision just to put it. I'm going to put it with a purpose of thinking it's along where we need it to go. It meets our comprehensive plan. We can deal with the influx of traffic and bodies. And then hopefully it can grow our our commercial part of it. So now that the rest of the residents who live here can benefit from that. So we can eventually get that grocery store or eventually get that restaurant chain or whatever services, so that the people that live in the peninsula don't have to spend 30 minutes or sometimes an hour just to go shopping at 610, or take their valuable tax dollars that we can use and go to Prince William County. So that's how I approach smart growth is by looking at it through that lens. Do I always get it right? No, I won't sit here and say I'll always get it right, but at least I wanted you guys to know how I approach it and think of it as not that I'm saying I'm anti-growth or I'm pro-growth. I am putting growth where it needs to go so that it can fund our commercial base so that we can have a larger tax commercial base, because right now as a county, we don't. Most of our revenue comes from residential property. And so for us, every time there's a tax season, we have that difficult question of tax rate because we rely so heavily on our residents for that, and we shouldn't. We need to be able to become more competitive in growing our commercial real estate. So my smart growth approach incorporates merging residential so that it meets the commercial density needs that we have. I don't want to put growth just for the sake of growth.
Our schools, we anticipate 600 new students every year. Just for comparison, Widewater Elementary School is 610 students. So that's about a new school's worth of students every year. Fortunately, they don't come in one place. We have excellent staff that develop an enrollment accommodation plan, which again is online, so you can see what our numbers, our anticipated growth is. Generally, we approach the Board of Supervisors when our school's cumulative seat capacity approaches 95%. And the goal is that by the time it reaches 100%, we'll have a new school. Currently, our high school capacity is approaching 100%. We are in the process of getting the land and building High School 6. But the problem is that we have a lot of areas where the density is so high that new developments and new students are pushing out the residents who've lived in that area, and they're being moved to a different school. So one of the things that we're looking at is how we decide where new developments are going, their kids are going to be assigned. Because it's not, for example, you may have heard Park Ridge was recently redistricted. That was a really awful, painful process because there's no good solutions. And the reason we don't do a county-wide redistricting is because we'd be doing it every 2 years. It's disruptive for everybody's families. So what we're doing is trying to target those redistrictings so that we can accommodate
Thank you for doing this meeting. My name is Steve Herman. I'm a recent new resident of Widewater. And thank you for bringing up the Decatur Road issue. I've noticed that since I've moved in. I would just want to ask you about the number of issues that you raised, public safety and broadband and other issues are interrelated. And I realize moving from Fairfax County into the area that I can't have all the conveniences that I had before. And I'm also responsible for my property and making sure that, when the power goes out and things like that, that I have some modicum of backup. But it seems that these are all interconnected with a resiliency issue. As storms become more severe, we can expect that for whatever reason the power is going to go out, we're going to lose the internet, the roads are going to be blocked. But I'm wondering if there's any sort of approach to the problems, that the challenges, I would say, that we face in Widewater from this resiliency standpoint. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for moving to Stafford County and to Widewater. It's one of the best communities. I argue is the best one. You have the best views, and no one knows that it's tucked away. It's Stafford's best kept secret. So thank you for coming down. But to answer your question, yes. So the county actually is doing a resiliency study. And so for those that don't know, it's kind of what the gentleman just addressed, is we're going to be looking at it comprehensively. How do we address issues so that going forward we are better prepared to handle them, and whether that's the infrastructure part of the resiliency or the environmental part of the resiliency. But you're absolutely correct. I think once we have that resiliency plan, then we have to look at the infrastructure master plans that we're doing and figure out how to shore up those weak spots and those problematic spots as best as we can, so that we can build on it and we can over time narrow that gap and have as few issues as possible. We're never going to be 100% issue free just because of the topography of Stafford County and Widewater. It's just not feasible. But how do we mitigate it so that it's not a constant inconvenience to residents? And so one way you do that is you have that resiliency plan, which our amazing staff in the county is working on. And once they do that and we get back our master plan, some transportation and broadband and all over, then we can start plugging the gaps as a board and identifying problematic parts and say, let's start finding out where our greatest source of strife is within the county, within Widewater, within Griffith, and let's start finding the funding mechanisms to fund that. Let's now give the board the information and the duty that we now have to do, which is figuring out how to fix the issue. But before we figure out that issue we have to figure out what is the source of that issue. And the way we've been doing it prior for Stafford County's history of being reactionary, which is what I said, we now are starting to change our mindset and starting to have that proactive mentality so that we are quicker to respond. Because if we're proactive and we're starting to fix those blind spots and those problematic areas in the county, then we will have a faster response time to deal with things. Like, for example, Dominion will be able to probably get to their lines faster. Our crews will be able to get to the water lines faster. Public safety will be able to respond faster. Schools will be able to respond. It all works, but in order to do that, you first have to have a plan. And the county has one. We're getting there, and as soon as the resiliency plan is done, it will be before the board. I will make sure to post that on my Facebook page so that you guys will know this is before us, and this is the link that you can find where you yourself can read on what the county has, because sometimes in those resiliency plans that our consultants will do and our staff will do, we may not capture everything that you guys will see. And so at this point, as much as it's on the county to do it, it's also on our residents to be involved in that process so that we truly can see what is it that you experience every day, because we're looking at things in a snapshot. Whereas you guys who've lived here for long, and for some of you your entire lives, or for you every day, you get to see and experience day to day how every aspect of our infrastructure impacts your daily life. And so I hope when the resiliency plan comes out and there's input, that people, either you show up or you send comments to us so that we know what is it that we need to be pinpointing and focusing our attention on. And before I forget, just to let people know, one of the steps that I plan to take, and which I'm already going to be doing, is I intend to do a walkthrough of the entire power line as much as I can for Widewater with Dominion. Their regional representative, Mr. Dela Cruz, and I will be doing a. We haven't pinpointed a date because of weather, but we're hoping to do it in either late spring or early summer to do a walkthrough of the lines. That's one part of the infrastructure to figure out what are some areas that maybe the lines can be buried, and if there are opportunities for that, what can we as a county do to help facilitate that? Because the more we can insulate the lines from the elements of the weather, then the less stress will be on our residents to worry about, are you about to have a blackout, or are you about to lose your internet, your cell service, because all of that also is an emergency issue. And so I do intend to have the walkthrough with Mr. Dela Cruz, and once I do, then we can start figuring out how to apply that information to the resiliency plan and to our infrastructure plan so that it's a comprehensive look at where the county needs to be fixed.
Or Garrison, or the Garrison has not been developed. They talked about both those areas, so can you answer those questions?
Yeah, great question. So I kind of hinted at that a little earlier. So one of the ways that Stafford County can attract commercial aspect growth of the county is through density. And unfortunately, our density is only located in certain corridors of the county, which, as we know, is 17, 610, and Route 1. Very rarely do you find it, and Butler Road are some of the areas. But as to the retail, one of the issues that we saw during the pandemic was that unfortunately people just weren't shopping and in stores, and if they were shopping, it was mostly through the e-retail business. They were doing the Amazons, the Walmart, what is the other ones? Like any store that delivered, people took advantage of that. And so for them, Instacart, it became a means of convenience. And so for us, we have to, when we're going out there attracting new commercial businesses to come in the county, we have to ask ourselves, what is unique to Stafford? What would our residents want to do? And I think part of that process involves us becoming more engaged in the public, because if retailers are telling us that we don't really want to come now because we don't have the data that shows that there's foot traffic, we have to be able to say, yeah, that may be true, but Stafford County specifically wants this because we have our residents giving us this input. So I would say one way that we can attract people is our residents have to give input and tell us what is it that you want to see. I know for me, and I'm telling you, I have contacted Whole Foods, I've contacted Walmart, I've contacted restaurants. Personally, I've done that separate from our economic development staff because I want to see it here too. We lose approximately over $600 million a year in tax revenue to our neighboring jurisdictions because we don't have that commercial base. Do you know what we could do with that amount of money in Stafford County? That is a large amount of money that we can use to help fund our infrastructure needs. And so for the Acquired Town Center question, when I got on the board, I said that we needed to fix that, and we are in the process of fixing that. I started the process to doing that, and hopefully in the coming months we can get to a point where we share with the public, but Acquired Town Center is being addressed. As for the Garrison, they did have their groundbreaking ceremony in October to announce the starting of the engineering phase of it. And that was the last that I heard. I know that the Pence group is trying to work through some stuff, but they did break ground in October, but they haven't given us an exact timeline. And that's basically what it is. But to really answer the question is, we kind of have to find what is unique to Stafford that we can sell and market to businesses so that they can come, so that you guys have the opportunity to live, work, and play in the county and be able not to go left, right, north, or south, to be able to enjoy your hard work and money and your family. In order to do that, we need to figure out how to attract them.
Yeah, thanks for holding that for me. Miss Allen, I've been sort of watching this growth and development situation in Stafford for over 30 years. And the developers always come in and they say, or like if we're approaching for commercial, they say don't have enough density. They've been saying that for years and years and years, but they go to Spotsylvania or other places, they're commercial, or we start these projects here that don't get finished. It seems something more going on. I don't know what it is, but it just is. And when they say you need more density, then we build more houses and we build more houses, and we don't have enough schools and our roads can't handle them. So I'm asking what else could be going on that they are choosing other locations rather than Stafford. When tax in Spotsylvania, I don't know if they still do, but they did. People were still building their commercial in Spotsylvania, and Stafford didn't have a people tax because of movement to prevent it from being enacted here. But still, people go to Spotsylvania with their businesses. So I'm just trying to understand what is causing this to happen.
giving them everything. And so maybe our neighbors to the south take a different approach to make them more competitive than us because they don't have to do what we do. They don't have the income markers that we do. So how do they make themselves more competitive? Maybe in years like this, they work with the state or they market themselves in a way to make it so that for us, it's not financially beneficial to us to make them offer that.
All right, thank you. Let's turn to an education question here. So I've heard many parents talk about scheduling and when their kids actually go to or go to school, the times. Can you talk a little bit, Dr. Warner, about the time that kids go to school and the scheduling process?
So our goal is to have a 6.5-hour instructional day. And because of the way our student body is distributed and the location of our schools and the efficiency of transporting them, we have 3 tiers to get kids to and from school. One of our biggest instructions to our new superintendent was we want them to get to school on time. Last year with the transportation problems, we had high school students missing first block. That's unacceptable. We have 5 high schools, 7 middle schools, 17 elementary schools. The largest block of students we move are in the elementary school. We have about 13,000 students. In order to try to meet all those requirements, we need an hour between the tiers. We need 3 tiers. And to get a 6.5-hour instructional day, we start at 7:30 and we end at 4 o'clock. We also need about 240 bus drivers and 240 buses, and we can count on any given day a 10 to 15% call-out rate, which is about standard across any school district. So we have to have enough bus drivers in place. With the pandemic, a lot of bus drivers, we didn't have as many, so we were hiring over the summer. We were competing with Prince William County that paid more. We were competing with Spotsylvania. This was a nationwide bus shortage. It wasn't a local issue. But we also have a lot of aging buses. So we have a lot of times that they're either out for scheduled maintenance or they break down. And we just don't have enough buses in our reserve to meet that because, again, this is an infrastructure question. So to buy buses, for example, for another dozen buses would be $1.6 million. And we have to schedule those purchases when we have the surplus funds in order to do it. So our schedule is built around the concept of 3 tiers, a 6.5-hour instructional day, and moving students, especially for our high school, to move I think we have 9,000 high school students to 5 high schools. Those runs, especially out in Hartwood, Rock Hill, are pretty long and arduous. Even to get to Widewater, our bus drivers come down the peninsula. They have to do a 3-point turn at the end of the peninsula to go back out. These are really challenging routes, and they also are very time-consuming. It can take over an hour. So all those things have to be taken into consideration in planning the schedule. So currently we are in the process, we have revised the schedule. So middle school will be going in the last time slot, which is 9:30 to 4. The elementary school will be going 8:30 to 3, and the high school 7:30 to 2. And it's just an unfortunate consequence of school location, the number of students being transported, and the time that we need to in order to give them an instructional day.
All right, thank you. We have another online question. This is a follow-up from Clayton Hill. He says there is a national movement to get the state legislatures to allow charter schools, and this has been successful in several states. What is your position if this happens here? I know you've already talked about charter schools, but he's got a different angle on this question.
I think that we're going to have to wait and see what the state's legislation is, what the state decides to do. I know that the governor has set aside $150 million for charter schools. He's insisting that this investment is not going to impact us, but until we know exactly what the proposals are, it's going to be, I personally don't support charter schools. I think by and large there's a lack of accountability, and I think it does divert resources away. But we're going to have to wait and see what those legislative initiatives are and how it's going to impact the schools. And I think then, too, that's another area where we may have to ask for more resources from the county if the state starts cutting resources from our budget, the state side of it. Then we may have to ask the county for more resources to make up that difference.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I mean, was it for both of us?
It can be,
Oh,
I'm sure.
I've already said that I think obviously it's not at our doorstep, and if it's at the state level, then I would recommend for those of you who are concerned to reach out to your delegate and your state senator so that your voice is heard, so that it doesn't get to the local level where we have to make that decision. But I would say as it stands, Dr. Warner kind of nailed it on the head where, you know, if you're earmarking money for a new system, then that means you're taking money away from the previous system, and that means that the tax burden could potentially be higher on residents because now we have to find a way to make up that lost funding to be able to fund our public school. So that kind of goes back to what I said before was, before we get to that point, as it relates to Stafford County, maybe not the state, but Stafford County, is we kind of need to figure out what the source of discontentment is with our parents and with our employees so that we can fix it, so that no one has that urge to want to explore what potential charter schools will look in our county. I think if we just work together to, and when I say work, I mean genuinely work, put our egos aside, put our issues aside, because at the end of the day, this is about investment in our students, in our kids, and our future. And if we can just seriously figure out what the issues are, then I think we can get to a point where the county and the school board can try to now have a roadmap to figure out how to address those issues that our parents and students and employees have, so that there isn't that need for a charter system to come to Stafford County. And so I think until that that decision is made from the governor, I would just urge you all to just remain active, reach out, like I said, to your state and delegate reps, and stay engaged with the school board meetings and stay engaged with the board of supervisor meetings so that your voices are heard and you don't feel like you have no other recourse but to maybe explore another opportunity for your kids to go to school.
Thank you. Are there any more questions from the audience? Oh, there is. Real fast, like Princess, you asked a question already. We have a hand up over here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Will. Will King. I live over by the off Stafford Borough, and my question is in regards to the broadband study that's being conducted. In particular, if the telecom companies are going to be the ones that actually have actually implemented these the existing infrastructure, would they not already know where all of the potential areas that need to be improved are? Wouldn't they have those records? Wouldn't they have that information? And I'm wondering if the county has sought that information.
I didn't hear the second part to your question about the county part.
Yeah, has the county
sought
worked
the information?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the way our study is looking at it is not so much of where the existing network is what is missing. So even if we get that, and we probably will maybe have to go and get some of the data from them, but we also need to figure out what does the map look like. Because they may just have a map of their own, but we need to have our own map where it's in our possession. Because oftentimes, I'll be honest, telecommunication companies have not been very forthcoming and they've not been very cooperating with the county when it comes to certain projects. Great example. I'll give you an example. one of the deals that we have in the county is that I think if you meet a certain density for a certain street or neighborhood, and I can't not remember the amount of homes, I think it's like 25, but I could be wrong, per block, we can request on behalf of our residents for that telecommunication provider to run lines at no additional cost. But it is up to them to determine when they do that. So an example would be in off Norman Road, I had gotten the request during the pandemic because, as I said, the pandemic kind of highlighted the haves and have-nots, right, in the worst way possible. And it didn't even matter if you had money or not. You just didn't have it. And Norman Road residents reached out to me and said, hey, we really need this. I mean, we're government workers. We have kids. And I said, well, let's look at what the density, once again, density is always, they love to use that against us. What is the density? And Norman Road actually met that density requirement. And so on behalf of the residents, we reached out to them. Saturday, March 26, 2022, they have not gotten back yet to give us a decision of when they will start even run the lines. Even though, based on the agreement we have with Comcast, that in good faith that they should have done it, or at least start the process, we haven't even gotten it yet. And I've checked in numerous times. And there's only so much our staff can do because legally we can't bind them. We're not allowed to, right? The state doesn't allow to. That's one of the things about being in Virginia is a lot of companies get, I call it the Wild Wild West, to do things to residents, and we don't really have anything. Our hands are tied. And so we can't compel Comcast because we're not allowed to legally to compel them to run those lines. We just had a mutual agreement. You would think in good faith that you as a company would want to offer that service to your customers in a time of need. But of course, oftentimes in our great country, that corporate social responsibility is missing, right? Companies just talk the talk, but they're not doing that. So imagine if during the pandemic, when people were in dire need of internet services for their livelihoods, whether it's jobs or school, and you weren't willing to meet that need 2.5 years in the pandemic, you really think they're going to be able to hand over stuff to us freely without us having to go through so many channels? And I know I'm going to catch flack from them from saying that, but I like to be honest and transparent. That's really what the honest and transparent truth is. And so by us having our own broadband study, it is in the county's possession, it's in the taxpayers' possession, and we now get to control and see what is it that we have and have not. How do we fix that? How can we utilize state and federal funds to be able to bridge those gaps instead of relying on our private sector to be the good stewards that so far in some cases they haven't. And it allow us to maybe look at alternative ways of funding things where maybe now we put the power and the control back into the county's hands when we can say, well, we have our own data now and we know what we need. So if we have monies available to maybe run lines or do certain things, we can say, let's do what capitalism teaches us and put it out in the market, and let's have the market decide who gets to run those lines versus Comcast or Cox or Verizon telling us, oh, we can do it, and they haven't done it. We get to now have more options available to us by being the masters of our own master plan, for a lack of a better phrase.
All right, thank you for that. Hey, I'm going to make a statement here. If there are things that you think need to be fixed, right, and you know that these two can't actually do it, you can put pressure on companies or other organizations by simply writing letters to the editors, talking about it on your social media, getting other people involved to react. So if things here are making you upset, do something about it, okay? Make sure people get out and vote. Make sure people are participating in their local democracy. That's how important this is. Do we have another question here from the audience?
My question is about cost to compete. Since I've been in the division, so 15 years, 16 years, there's often been discussion about the fact that we don't get the same amount of cost to compete as Prince William and Fairfax, when actually, if you look at it, at least last time I looked at it, our cost of living isn't significantly lower than, which makes it even more difficult for us to keep our staff because they can work here for a year or two and make at least a third more. going up to Prince William. We used to have, and I'm mostly talking to you, Dr. Warner, only because I have my only experiences with the school system. We used to have folks actively lobbying, trying to get that change so that we got the same cost to compete as Prince William and Fairfax. And I'm wondering if we're still doing that or if that's something we've just kind of given up on.
No, we've absolutely not given up on that. That cost to compete would be very beneficial to us, especially since where we're located, most of our teachers, when they leave, most of our staff leaves, they go to Prince William. It's one of the reasons we're struggling to get our pay scale up higher, so we're at least competitive. And our competition isn't Spotsylvania, and it's not south of us, it's north of us. And that cost to compete is a real important thing that would help us. So I know I've lobbied, I lobbied my state senators. I've talked to Jennifer McClellan. I've talked to Scott Sorville. I've talked to the delegates. We've definitely been working to try to get that rectified because I think it's an important thing for us, especially where we are, because I think if anything, we need it more than Fairfax and Prince William does. But it's really been a difficult, and I know it's been lobbied for years. One of the things we've talked about is hiring a lobbyist. I know we have one jointly with the Board of Supervisors, but that's an expense that I'm not sure that when we've already got a budget that's pretty tight, that I want to invest money in a lobbyist for things that the state should be much more receptive in acquiring and giving us. And I would think that, when the school board representatives talk to their state legislators and say, we need this, it should have some value, and it doesn't always.
Thank you for those answers. Are we still losing a lot of teachers to other places north? And how big of a problem is that? And is pay the issue? I have someone here telling me that like a 20-year teacher makes under $62,000 a year. And I've had other people tell me that a lot of new teachers will come here, work their 2 or 3 or 4 years to get the experience, and then move on to someplace else. Is that still happening?
We are a training ground for teachers that go north of us. We hire them, we train them, we invest a lot in training. It costs us probably $10,000 to $15,000 to bring a teacher up to experience and get them to where they need to be. And as soon as we get them there, they leave for Prince William. That's one of the reasons that in our current budget, the biggest investment we're making is in addressing that pay scale so that we can hire and retain the best teachers. We cannot keep, and we lose last year, for the last 3 years, our retirement rate, our loss of teachers it's gone from 14 to 16 to 18%. When you're losing about 1 in 5 teachers every year, that's a problem. It's a serious problem. And the number one reason that most of them do leave, if they tell us a reason, because they aren't required to, some of them are just normal retirements. We have a lot of spouses of military families that they get relocate. One of the biggest reasons is the pay. It's the pay. It's not going to solve all problems, but Stafford is a pretty expensive cost of living. Many of our teachers can't afford to buy homes. Many of our, it's the same for deputies and firefighters. We have to pay these people that work in our community a salary that allows them to live in our community. And in many cases, we aren't doing that. We aren't doing it well enough. As I said before, 70% of our staff lives in Stafford County, and we have to do better.
I would piggyback and say what Stafford County is kind of experiencing is kind of the microcosm of what this country is experiencing in education, where we're at the precipice where we have a severe shortage in teaching, and we're not fixing that. We're not even being creative, thinking out of the box how to address that, because teaching colleges are struggling with enrollment. You can look across the state, across the country. Enrollment in teaching schools, whether it's at the master's levels or the bachelor's levels, it is at an all-time low. They are struggling with enrollment. And so we, as elected officials on the state, on the county side, and the state and the federal level, have to figure out how to address that. And part of that is, as you said, the cost to compete. You have to start addressing the problem, because at the end of the day, the only people that are going to be harmed by it is our children. And if our children are harmed in terms of not getting the quality education that they're supposed to receive, then as stewards, as adults, what do we what world are we leaving behind for them to inherit if we're not giving them the tools to succeed? And part of that is having the quality education, right? We're all products of public schools sitting in here, and for those of us online. And so it's kind of go back to what I said earlier, where school boards have to start telling us what is it that you really need. Don't tell us what you think you want us to hear or what you think you might get us to vote on. Give us that difficult decision to make. Put it in front of us every year where you say to us, this is the true cost to make Stafford County Public Schools competitive, to keep our people here, and to make us a place that people want to come and teach. Because one of the things that I found out was that most of our new teachers come from Pennsylvania, right? I mean, our largest teaching school is Mason, and most of our teachers come from Pennsylvania. I mean, what does that tell you? It means, it tells you that as a state, we're not doing a very good job of creating opportunities for new teachers to enter college or the workforce. We're not incentivizing the job. We're not taking care of our people. And you start doing that by thinking of ways to make the job enticing, whether it's cost to compete, better pay, better quality of living, whatever it is. But until we start addressing these issues, we are going to be at a greater disadvantage, and our kids will only suffer for that. And in the end of the day, I will go back again, your property value will suffer, because people, number one reason to move into any county is the first thing you do, and I know because I'm a parent, is you go and you look up what the test scores are, the student population, what projects are in the pipeline. You look at all those things before you buy a house, because you want to make sure when you send your kids to school, they're getting the best education that they can possibly get. And if you don't invest in teaching and you don't invest in education, you are going to reap the benefits that you get. And at the end of the day, it's within each one of our hands to fix that. And you fix that by you go vote, you go show up at meetings, you go advocate for your children, you go advocate for your nieces, your nephew, your neighbor's kids, because they're the ones that get to inherit everything. And if we don't give them the tools to be successful, then there's no one to blame but us. And right now we're failing kids.
So I've done a lot of canvassing for candidates, knocking on doors. And a few doors I've knocked on, the people have told me they'd be willing to pay a little extra in taxes if they knew it went directly to teachers' pay. Is that something the Board of Supervisors can do? Can they say this amount can go directly to teachers' pay, or how does that relationship work?
The superintendent and the school board work to create a budget, and then we ask for this portion. We can't earmark money that particular way. It's that we're trying to do, because, as I've said before, the most important thing to your child's education is the teacher they have. The teacher makes all the difference. We keep good teachers by paying them a salary that allows them to live in our community. It's a profession. They have 4 years of college. They have student debt. They have this to become as many. But with the minute they leave college, they're already making less than.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? Elaine? Yes, we do.
Thank you. Ms. Allen, you mentioned that you want to support more deputies for the sheriff's office. How do you feel about increasing support to social services and partner agencies in the community, and in that way perhaps reducing the demands on the sheriff's office? In other words, supporting people, keeping them out of trouble, helping them, in their life situation.
funded, United Way, Serve, Food Bank, any of our nonprofit, because we have to, as you said, we have to make sure that we are meeting people in other areas of need, so that we're not stressing our deputies to maybe handle situations that they're not necessarily equipped to handle. We're not putting them in difficult situations. And so, as leaders, you go out in the community, you dress and you meet people at their basic needs. And I try to do that by making sure, as I said, our nonprofits are funded, and they're really asking us. I don't, as I said, during this budget process, one of the things I said was, I need you to tell me exactly what it is that you really need. Don't tell me what the board is, you think the board is going to ask you. Because when you give us that data, if you, for example, come to me and say, we really need $10 million, just as an example, versus you put it in your request, you need $2 million. I'm going to look at that number and say, well, maybe you don't have a great need. But if I see you're asking for large sums of money and you provide documentation of why, that gives me insight into the community in ways that I necessarily can't see. Because in my head now I'm going to be thinking, wait a minute, they're asking for $10 million because of X, Y, and Z, and now I will investigate why is it that you need this money, and what is it that we can do as a board to help meet our needs of our citizens, so that they're not only relying on community services, but as a county, we're also meeting them at their needs. And so by giving us your true need, it helps us to really understand the true scope of our county in terms of what our citizens are really missing, lacking, and are in service.
All right, thank you, everybody. I'm getting the signal to wrap things up, so we're going to go to closing comments. As we close, make sure you tell folks how they can contact you or make themselves heard at your meetings and such, if you will. And don't forget to talk a little bit about what you've accomplished these first few years you've been in office. All right, we'll start with Dr. Warner. Thank you.
Thank you for all for attending this meeting, and I want to thank Mr. Johnson, Miles, and Precious for setting this up for us. This first 2 years of office, and I don't know if Ms. Allen can agree with this, but we were kind of thrown for a loop because of COVID. So we were constantly reacting to the situation on the ground. I am extremely proud of the work we've done to try to improve pay for our bus drivers, our food service workers, our support staff, our uniform salary scale, but also for our teachers. We have been fighting for that since I've been on the board, and I feel like this budget, we may actually get there. I've worked very closely with staff in the development of High School 6, and I'm trying to think what else we've done, but it's been a challenge because I'm one vote on a board. And a lot of what you do is communicating with your fellow board members and trying to build consensus. And I've also worked very hard that it's not just the schools in my district that are important, because it's the schools in everyone's district. So I visited Ferry Farm in King George and George Washington, and I've gone through the school and I've watched the renovation and I've monitored it. And I spend a lot of time trying to look at all the schools, because it's a division. It's not just mine. It's not just the schools that are in Griffis-Widewater. And they all have to be good schools. I talked to the principals. I've met with the principal at Hartwood. I've talked to the principals at Park Ridge about the redistricting. I've talked to the principal at Hartwood about redistricting. Because when we're making those decisions, certainly I can rely on the member from the other district, but it's important for me to look at it firsthand and to talk to those people that are involved firsthand. I think going forward, I think the biggest thing that we need schools. We need, I'd like to see Hartwood rebuilt. We have, I think, over 63% of the schools in our county are over 60 years old. Usually that's about the lifespan. Drew Middle School dates back to the 50s. The Melcher Center dates back to the 30s. You know, these are all aging infrastructure that create other issues that we have to address. You can reach me. I am at the school board. And my email is warnereb@staffordschools.net. If you go to the Stafford School webpage, there's also a phone number listed for me. I have a cell phone through the school that you can contact me. I really do try to answer the emails from my constituents. I may not answer every email because I don't want to talk to someone else's constituents and give my opinion on a certain issue and it be different than what somebody else says. So if you contact me, please say that you live in Griffis-Widewater. It's helpful. I can't remember everything you asked. I think that this has been a really steep learning curve, and this last 2 years has thrown us for a lot of curves at us with COVID. But I will tell you that getting out in the schools, participating, going to the CTE, I actually we have a CTE program with our Stafford Fire Department where we have students that are learning how to be firefighters, and I'm impressed with the amount of opportunities that Stafford Schools offers, and I'm hoping that we can strengthen the school system because I do believe it's one of the most important resources we have as a community.
So yeah, in summation, kind of what Dr. Warner said, these 2 years we didn't have the opportunity to kind of slowly digest information and grow into the role. We were just kind of thrown into the fire hydrant and try to figure it out. And I would say, considering what some other places did, we've done a great job in trying to keep Stafford stable. As evident by, our staff has done an amazing job in making sure that our budgets have been on target and have been met. We haven't exceeded our budget, and we haven't. If anything, I believe we've saved money in a couple of our budgets because we've undershot our spending. So that's a testament to the amount of staff and the amount of amazing work that they do. But personally, what I've done, a lot of the stuff that I've done has been a lot of community-based. As I said, I work with a lot of grassroots organizations within the county to get stuff done, to meet people at their needs. We've helped started a food bank at the United Way. We do a lot of outreach in the community. I've partnered with the health department a couple of times to do a lot of informational stuff. I've also, in Griffith side, I have got Onville Road to be extended and gotten wider so that I know a lot of families in Griffith side have walked along 610 to get to work. And so I wanted to make sure that safety aspect was addressed. And so that side of the road has gotten widened, and soon they're going to be installing mass arm lighting to also illuminate that part because it's very, very dangerous for our pedestrians. I have supported our schools. I have supported our public safety. I have, been pretty transparent as much as I can be and open and honest. Of course, I'm never going to get everything right. There's one thing about me is that I'm not going to sit there and say that I have all the answers. I tried my best to get back to people whenever people call me, email me. Some people are actually amazed how quick I answer my phone. I try to be very, very responsive, considering that I don't have staff. It's just me. So, those are just some of the things that I won't sit here and bore you. But, my job is, the way I approach the office is this. You shouldn't be hearing or seeing your politicians unless you really need to. And if you're hearing or seeing me for things that are not beneficial to the district, then that's a problem. And so when I take that mindset, I keep a very, very low profile, and I only make appearances and only do things because at the end of the day, my job isn't to stand in front of people and take credit or to say, oh, I've done this. I'm going to give myself a pat on the shoulder. I was elected to do that. And so because I was elected to do that, I don't go out there and necessarily broadcast to everyone I've done. I don't take as much photo ops. I don't do any of that because in my mindset, this is what I signed up for. And if this is what I signed up for and I'm doing it, then that's all the validation that I need. Some people would argue I probably do need to do more photo shoots and more ops, but for me, that's just not who I am. And so going forward for the remainder of my term, I plan to approach things the same way. I've kind of given you guys the way that I look at things. I'm open to hearing some of the ways that I'm not doing my job well. All of us, do we like criticism? Absolutely not, but it's necessary. It allows us to grow. It allows us to become better at our jobs. And so if there are things that I'm not doing or there are things that you think I should be doing, I'm more than open to listen, but I also ask that you be respectful. There are times when I've gotten stuff that have been very, very offensive, and I will say, I don't think that's how we should have dialogue. But even in those times, I still am responsive. But I would just ask that you allow me some grace in this job, because as we said, we were kind of thrown into this as newbies. We've never served in office. We don't even have the experience about a lot of this stuff. And so I would say, considering where we are now, Dr. Warner and I have done a great job navigating some of those tready waters. Yes, maybe our boats have maybe at times felt like it was about to capsize, but thankfully it hasn't. But I think going forward, you guys know where I stand on stuff, at least the best. And I will tell you, if you reach out to me on things, I would say this is what I believe. I know coming in front of us, our tax rate is going to be voting soon. And I don't want people to sit here and think that I just want a tax hike. And just because, you know, my political leanings, I like taxes. Absolutely not. I don't like taxes as much as the next person. But taxes are a necessary evil because it funds the very things that you're asking us for. Stafford County has serious needs, serious deficits. And if we don't get serious in fixing it, you are going to pay so much exponentially in the future for those lack of being, for having that lack of foresight, that maybe in today's age, it may cost you, for example, $5 million to fix a project, but because you wanted to say, well, I saved on the tax rate, knowing that you very well needed it, in 5 years, when you're forced to address that issue, it may now cost you $50 million. And so when I approach the tax rate, that's how I look at it, as these are things we need. We are a growing county. We're not established. We're not Fairfax County, where they've experienced their growth, and they get to see on the other side of that growth horizon what stability looks like. We haven't gotten there yet. We are in the process of experiencing growth still. And as we navigate that growth and navigate that population explosion, we have glaring needs. And until we address those needs, we are never going to get to the level of services and quality of life that our citizens deserve. And part of that is making difficult decisions with the tax rate, with our budget, and with making, you know, choices on, you know, where should our roads get fixed, or where should our schools? I would love to fix everything. I absolutely would. And believe me, half the time, I've even told Dr. Warner, and I've told people who know me, I get frustrated because I turn over every leaf and I feel defeated when I can't give people the answer they want. And it's not from a lack of effort. It's just, I know the county has so many needs that as much as I would love to just have it all be concentrated in Griffis-Widewater, I know that the county as a whole can only operate when we look at it through that prism and not look at it only as our individual districts, because especially as we're the Northern District, every after effect will have an impact in the entire county. So if we're not addressing something in Griffis-Widewater and we ignore it, the rest of the districts are going to feel it. Or if maybe Aquia needs something fixed or Falmouth needs something fixed, it's for a reason, because that means the rest of the network in the county will benefit from that. And so I hope going forward that you guys will allow me the grace to do the job. Stay patient with me. Absolutely call me out when I don't do what I'm supposed to do. Reach out to me and hold me accountable, because at the end of the day, I was elected to do the job that you wanted me to do. And the only way I know if I'm doing that is by you holding me accountable. And if I have to have difficult conversations, then that's fine, because if I don't know what I'm not doing, then I can't be better. And at the end of the day, you guys need me to be better. And I would leave it as that. And in order for you to contact me, I would say follow my Facebook page. I'm going to give you the exact handle. It is Tinesha Allen, Stafford County Supervisor for the Griffis-Widewater District. I know it's a little wordy, but if you just Google or search Facebook, Tinesha Allen, Stafford County, it will come up. You can follow my page, I try to keep stuff updated. You can also email me. My email address is listed on the county website, but it's pretty simple. It's my first initial T, my last name Allen, T Allen at staffordcountyva.gov. If you call me, it's 540-940-5099. I am more than open, and I'm here. Like I said, I hear you, and I want to keep hearing you, and I won't hear you unless you tell me what is it that I need to hear. And so with that said, I really appreciate Mr. Johnson Miles for taking his time out to moderating this, to Dr. Warner, my colleague on the school board. I hope that you guys do support her, show up and show out, and let her know what is it that you want to see in terms of the school board. And thank you to LCPM for having this opportunity for us to have this town hall now that we're back to somewhat of a COVID normal. And as I said in the beginning, I'm hoping to have this be a biannual event, and maybe at the end of the year, we can kind of look back and see what are some things that the board did that we probably shouldn't have done, what are some things that we did that was great for the district and the county, and what are some things for the new year that Dr. Warner and I can focus on so that we can start addressing your needs. Because, like as I said, our job is here to serve you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, our elected officials. We appreciate you doing this town hall. I also want to thank the LCPM network for conducting this town hall, and Princess, our producer, in that fact. As they both have said, participation is the key to getting your things you need fixed. Okay, you've got to participate in town halls. You've got to contact them, contact other supervisors, other school board members. Go to the school board meetings. Go to the board supervisor meetings. Talk about stuff like this on social media. Attend organization meetings like political party meetings. That's where by you participating, that's how things get fixed. And they don't know what you want unless you tell them what you want. Just remember, democracy is at its best when the people's voices are heard. And with that,
Wait, hold on. I just had one quick, sorry, Bill.
Okay.
I just remembered what he just said something. Our meetings, our Board of Supervisor meetings are all streamed online. If you happen to have cable network, it's also on regional TV. But if you go to the Stafford County website, you can watch every one of our meetings. And if you can't watch it live, you can go back on a Saturday night and binge watch it, just like how you can binge watch Bridgerton, or a cake show, or, you can binge watch the Board of Supervisors meeting. Now, I don't recommend you do it, but you can binge watch it, or you can take it in snippets. And one of the great things that we do as well is the Friday before our board meeting, because our board meetings are held every second and fourth Tuesdays of the month. And one of the great things we do is we put our agenda on the county website. That way, if there's an issue that you're passionate about, you can go look at the agenda and see if it's there so that you can come out and speak. Ms. Calendar can speak to this. It's a great way for you to stay informed of what issues will be before the board. It's a great way for you to become more interactive with the county. I know the school board do something very similar to us, but my point is you have every avenue to become more engaged, and I don't want people to be on the sideline. We all have busy lives, but this is your tax dollars, and this is your community, and it only gets to where you want it to get if you become more involved.
And just for the record, the school board meetings are also live streamed, but we also have a digital comment section where you can actually post comments that we read ahead of the meeting. So if you can't attend in person, you can still have your voice heard by using that digital comment form.
there's been many times I've attended certain board meetings and then taken my snippets of me asking a question and their answers. Well, they don't actually answer. It's just a statement. Yeah, it's just a statement. But and then posted that on my website and shared it on other websites. So you can do that. Okay, you can take a certain snippet and share it and get more people involved. And the whole idea is to get people involved. This is your elected officials. They're here to listen and respond to you. All right. With that, thank you very much for being here, everyone, and have a great rest of your weekend.